Welcome to West Country Wanderings and welcome to another one in my railway series. In fact, it's Lost Railway Walks number 21. It's a line, or rather a railway, which we've covered previously here on West Country Wanderings, and it's the Midland and South Western Junction Railway, which ran from the town of Cheltenham Spa to the port of Southampton. How did this all come about? Well, I have touched on the history of it, so I'm not going to recap what I've done. I've done a video looking at Cirencester Watermoor Station there in the county of Gloucestershire. They had some brilliant workshops there, which were there for many years, so that was like a centre of operation. And also here at the town of Swindon, that's where we are today, in the county of Swindon. I'm about 3 miles to the southeast of Swindon town centre. It's a beautiful day. I've caught the train to Swindon from where I live in Gloucestershire, hopped over to the bus station, and then a bus. There's a bus literally every 10 minutes to here at a place called Coate Water. Now that lake over there was built not for a railway, but for something else we cover here on West Country Wanderings quite often, and that's a canal. And the canal was, yes, you know it of course, the Wilts and Berks Canal. When the canal closed in 1914, round about there, this land here and the water park was given over to the people of Swindon, so through Swindon Borough Council, and that's still the case today, some 115 years, or 110 years should I say, 11 years later. It's often been voted the most popular place for Swindonians, I think that's what they call residents of Swindon, to come and visit, and I can see exactly why that is. Literally a 10-15 minute bus ride from the town centre brings you here. It's absolutely beautiful. Just over there, nothing to do with our railway though, is a springboard, jumping springboard. You used to be able to swim in the lake here, and it's an Art Deco springboard which takes you right, which would have taken you right into the water here, which is nice and cooling. Now, our railway didn't actually run through Coate Park itself. It went over a little bit further to the east, heading south out of Swindon Town Railway Station. So it had its own station, nothing to do with the present day GWR one on the main line between South Wales and Paddington, but its own, for reasons I've mentioned previously. But we're going to touch on another part of the history of the M&SWJR here. It's always a mouthful because of the tunnel. We'll talk about that. But the line went over there, and we're going to be picking up the line towards the M4, which also links into the story of the railway because there's a connection between the two. And then going to be following the line of the railway to a village called Chiseldon. Now, I've got lots of old black and white photographs of the railway in that area around Chiseldon. I know the station is no longer there, but I'm hoping to see the landscape of where the line went to, because it's really interesting around there, and see if we can relate to some of the old black and white photographs in the book that I've got in my rucksack, so I'll show you that in a bit. But before we leave Coate Park and start heading south along the old railway track bed, there's something of railway interest. Now, one time you had extensive railway engineering workshops, of course, by the GWR, not our railway, M&SWJR, so they were mainly at Cirencester there, Watermoor. But I think these days this is the only surviving turntable in and around the Swindon area. As I say, we're about 3 miles southeast of the town, and you have this brilliant miniature railway. It's not running today, but it does run every Sunday in the summertime and also bank holidays as well. Got a lakeside signal box there. That's brilliant, isn't it? I'll just show you some other bits of it. I think that's where they store all their engines there. And it's a great location almost next to the railway here. As I say, I think it opened in the early 1970s. If you know more information about how it started, please drop a comment in the video below. Let's just have a quick more of a look around it before we head south. So here you have this level crossing here as a minor track that takes you into the site. I can't go through that. It's obviously it's all locked up when it's not in use for security reasons, but obviously when it's open, they allow passengers in there. And the track goes through this delightful wooded section here at Coate Water, which is a country park as well as a lake. I think there is like a small arboretum here as well with a collection of trees. Yeah, it's very nice. It's always difficult covering these when they're in action though, because they attract a lot of young children, and because of the nature of the locomotives and size of the carriages, it's virtually impossible not to film children on it, as I experienced recently when I was at Pekarama in East Devon. But I have covered a previous one at Stratford Park and also at Evesham Vale Light Railway. So we're going to leave the miniature railway behind us now. Nice that it is. Let's see if they've got a website. I'll put a link to. I think they may have a Facebook page. And we're going to head southeast now to Chiseldon. That's just I'm heading south here through Coate Water. Yeah, I've just noticed this line of fence. Now this doesn't indicate the line of the railway, but they obviously utilised the rails when they were taken up by the Midland and South-Western Junction Railway to build this fence, because obviously this land here is council-owned land for the people of Swindon. That over there, heading over south towards the Marlborough Hills, is obviously agricultural private farmland. That's the boundary, and what they obviously decided to do was use the old rails when they were lifted. Now, in terms of lifting, the line closed in the, well, we'll talk about that, but the line led on, or rather it was redone in the early 1970s when they were building the M4 motorway south of this town of Swindon here. We'll be walking towards in the general direction of Junction 15, but while they were building that between the 1970s, they were utilising part of the track bed, indeed the railway itself, of the Midland and South-Western Junction Railway. I've never seen any photograph. If you've ever seen a photograph of that being in use with the railway and the M4 being built, I'd love to hear from you, because I don't think I've ever seen one, but indeed that was the case, which of course a bit of an irony, because the roads were kind of the death knell to this railway line and many others. So our lake is over there, which is, well, particularly on a warm day, good to see people out enjoying it. As I say, you can get here easily using public transport. That's the book I'm going to be using now. There we go. That is. So it's the Midland and South-Western album. I think it's book 1 of 2. I picked this up for the grand price of £1.50 in the Cotswold Canals bookshop in Brimscombe, there by Brimscombe Port. I'll be referring to this, but the photographs in this, which I'll be putting up on the screen throughout today's video, are truly remarkable. Story of the Midland and South-Western Junction Rail. I can't remember if I covered the real beginnings of it. Started in May 1872, a meeting in a hotel in Savernake in Wiltshire, which is obviously the county just south of where we are here today in Swindon. I think Chiseldon is in Swindon as well, though it is quite a rural area. And that was brought about by one James Cobbleston. He was a local solicitor. In fact, the house where he was living was eventually very close, I'll say eventually for reasons that will become clear, to the Swindon Town Station, which was the Midland and South-Western Junction Railway Station. And lots of dignitaries, businessmen got together there at Savernake, not far of course from the woods, because of railway. Another railway had arrived, obviously Brunel, here in Swindon, and it was taking their trade away for the people that are living in Marlborough and other places thereabouts. So Marlborough felt quite isolated. The coaches that once went to Marlborough were drifting away because they were no longer needed. All the action was between Paddington, Swindon, Bath and Bristol and on into South Wales, completely bypassing places like Marlborough. So they got together, had a meeting, saying that we needed our own railway line. Now the Act of Parliament for opening the line was passed in 1873 with one Ambrose Lethbridge Goddard, who lived, should I say, at the Lawn here in Swindon. Huge kind of park area there, just on the edge of the old town centre. And the solicitor, our solicitor friend, became the company's solicitor of the line. Now the company wasn't actually the Midland and South-Western Junction Railway. It was the Swindon, Marlborough and Andover Railway, because they had ideas to link Swindon to Marlborough and Marlborough to Andover, and thence down to the ports, the coastal ports. They thought the Swindon would have interests in getting down to the ports, because the GWR line went east-west, it didn't go north-south. Now there was a bit of a public falling out between James Cobbleston Townsend, the solicitor, and the Goddard family. A lot of the directors were actually proposing that they sold the lawn here in Swindon where the Goddards live, because it would have made the route easier for them to go. But unfortunately, Goddards wouldn't sell. It had been in their ownership for generations, so they just wouldn't release it. In fact, they gave them a price of some £30,000, and back in 1873 that was a vast sum of money. So it meant that to get from Swindon, where the present day GWR station is, heading south to Marlborough, they needed to go through Swindon Hill, which meant, of course, building a tunnel underneath the hill, adding a huge cost and stretching the budgets of the burgeoning railway here. Now, construction of the tunnel started in earnest in October of 1875 near a part of Swindon known as Bellevue, so kind of to the east of the present day town centre. Now, they utilised a contractor called William Wright, but because he was unsure of his tunnelling and burrowing skills, he actually sublet the contract to a Mr. Young from the Leicestershire area, obviously in the East Midlands. The problem was the geology in that area wasn't great. There was a mixture of liases and clays, and that always creates a problem, like we've come across previously, the Sapperton Tunnel on the Thames and Severn Canal. But anyway, construction started, but it had to be abandoned many times. When they started to build cuttings towards what would have become the portal, sides of the cuttings started to collapse, and there were lots of tools buried in those landslips. Just picked up a sign here saying Coate to Hodson. Never come across Hodson before. That's not part of our walk. So there's the lakes of Coate Water. We're heading south down to a footbridge over the M4, and then we'll be going along towards Stockbridge Copse before we pick up the line of the old railway down to Chiseldon, which is here. Hodson is here. It's suggesting doing that as a 4 mile, 2.5 hour leisurely walk, because there's a pub there in the Cali Arms public house apparently. But this is really nice here, because just to the right of where I am is a heronry and nature reserve. Bird hides in it, which is down through there in what is known as Paddy's Copse. By the end of 1875, both Mr. Young and Mr. Wright were forced to admit defeat on trying to construct the railway tunnel underneath Swindon Hill. They gave up, effectively handing over the contract back to the Swindon and Marlborough and Andover Railway Company. They then sought out a tender to try and get another contractor that would take the work on. But obviously word got round amongst all the building contractors, because of the difficulty of the geology and nature of it, that no one took work on. Rather than admitting defeat and having a backup plan, rather than doing a tunnel, they soldiered on themselves using the Swindon, Marlborough and Andover Railway's own workers. So that continued on through January of 1876, but unfortunately things just didn't get better. It went from worse to worse. They started to put them down. That's the easy way of putting it. Put them down towards the portal. But again, those slips and landslips were still happening and trying to cut through the difficult geology of that area. Now, the construction works ground on throughout the summer of 1876, but progress was extremely slow, and the company themselves stopped by October of that year, admitting complete defeat. In fact, the works in that area, that part of Swindon there, caused a great deal of inconvenience to the local residents, and therefore a lot of bad feeling to the railway company. For many years after the abandoning of the works, right through towards the 20th century before redevelopment started, the abandoned section of the tunnel, approaches to it, various cuttings, and also lots of tools just laid waste there. It appears on the 1885 Ordnance Survey map. See if I can find that and drop that in around now, where you could see the working and the cutting now, the approach to it. Of course, the area had to be infilled, and I think that didn't take place until the earlier part of the 20th century. So how could they continue? Well, they decided then to do a new route. Now, we have looked at this before when I've looked at a video called Swindon's Other Railway. I walked from Rushy Platt there. You have that amazing skew bridge that the railway company built of deep red brick over the Wilts and Berks Canal, and then striking up north towards the GWR main line. We're connecting into that, and then going the other way into Swindon Town railway station, which opened itself in 1881 to great fanfare. And then, of course, they were heading south on a slightly different route to where I'm walking to the M4 now. Well, I can hear the rush of the M4 ahead of me, so I won't assault your ears with that deafening road noise. But I will link to that video, Swindon's other railway, which I did maybe 18 months ago now. It was problematic because I was trying to walk along the line of the canal in the northern part of Swindon up to Swindon Hill Country Park, where of course you have the present day Swindon and Cricklade Preserve Railway, which uses a section of the Midland and Southwestern Junction Railway. And it was problematic due to Thames Water shutting off a lot of it because of pipe laying. But there we go, that's what happens when you're doing Lost Railway walks sometimes. But thankfully today it's clear, so I'll see you on the other side of the M4, and then we'll be picking up the line of the railway that headed south to the town of Marlborough. So I've crossed over that spectacularly ugly concrete circular footbridge. Well, the top of it isn't, but the leading up to it, obviously that's because of getting bikes up there. But this area here, though it doesn't look like it now, was I think where the temporary lines or rails were laid to ease construction of the M4, to bring in aggregates, tarmac and other materials that were required for building the M4, because our line, which later became the Midland and Southwestern Junction Railway, for reasons I'll explain, is along here. And then the fence line over there, I can make out a couple of old sleepers propped upright. So at this point here, the Sarson Way splits off, going to that Hod something or other hamlet with a pub in it. So if you want to do that walk, you can strike out across the field there. But if you like walking old railway lines, this is now the track bed of the old Midland and Southwestern Junction Railway from Cheltenham to Southampton. Now you might be wondering why I didn't start my walk today at Swindon Town Station to here and carry on to Chiseldon that way. Well, as far as I can work out from the research I've done, desktop research from old books and maps sort of thing, there doesn't seem to be anything left of the route, because Swindon later on obviously became a railway town, as we know with GWR. Obviously that was before the Midland and Southwestern Junction Railway, and later in the 50s and 60s it was designated a new town like other ones, Milton Keynes, Basildon, Yate, Redditch, all of the others, and grew up rapidly. So there was a huge expansion of the town in the 60s, which is of course after this line closed, and a lot of it is just obliterated. It's even obliterated, as far as I can tell, the route where it goes through to the east of the lake in Coate Park, because of re-landscaping, planting trees, and of course all these trees here on the line of the railway here as we head south towards Chiseldon have grown up since the railway closed. It's difficult to make out the track, where the track bed would have been. Obviously we know this is the route, but occasionally there are some fence posts which you can see in hedges, which gives you confirmation that yes, you are walking along what was once a railway from Cheltenham to Southampton. They may also slightly be confused, if not one of these other ones in the Midland and Southwestern Junction Railway series, is why I keep referring to the Midland, Marlborough and Andover Railway Company, when it was known as the Midland and South Western Junction Railway. So how did that come about? Well, basically it was because the financial fortunes of the railway struggled after it opened. There was a branch line from Marlborough to the Taunton to Reading and London main line, the cut-off line, and but that didn't really help Marlborough's fortune. So it was great that they had their own railway heading in a north-south direction between Swindon down to Andover there in Hampshire, which is obviously just outside West Country Wanderings region, striking into a more easterly route. But it wasn't enough. And they had lots of rivalries with the GWR. The GWR were not their friends. They weren't very cooperative at all and charged them heavy rates and access charges for places like Rushy Platt there that we saw previously. Apologies for pronunciation in that video. I think I pronounced it Rushley Platt, as many of you that live in the area picked up. It is definitely Rushy Platt even. But yeah, so they thought the best way of reviving their fortunes was to connect up with the Midland Railway by striking north from the town of Swindon up to the town of Cheltenham Spa in Gloucestershire there, and joining the Midland Railway at Lansdowne Station, or Junction before it, via the village of Andoversford, where there was already a railway line heading east from Cheltenham to Banbury in Oxfordshire. And it joined that one just before it got to Cheltenham, and then joined up with Lansdowne Station, which is indeed the present day. There's only one railway station now in Cheltenham, railway there. And that did help the railway after a point. It did struggle on with outdated locomotives and poor patronage by passengers, but once it got the support of the Midland Railway, and they did help it, in fact they helped pay for the line to be doubled through much of its length from Cheltenham to Southampton, because it was of assistance to them to get down to Southampton from their major industrial areas in the Midlands as well. And that's what happened. It was a great saviour of the line. So it's quite noticeable here that we're on quite a bit of embankment there, as you see, with drops down both sides. So a fair bit of engineering to get to Chiseldon. And when I arrived at Chiseldon, which is about another mile and a half, I think, walking to go, it literally divided the village in half by going through a deep cutting. Although the station there, as I'll insert now, was a rather attractive one. As I said, there are no remains of it, but I'm going to see if we can find any other remains of this railway line, which was much loved. And the one at Ogbourne St George, which we kind of did a walk. We went from Ogbourne St George area to the town of Marlborough, because then we had a look at the site of Marlborough Tunnel, which I did find in that video. And I'll link to that one at the end of this one as well, in case you haven't seen that. Yeah, they were two similar, virtually identical designs, and very, very attractive designs they were too, complementing the attractiveness of Chiseldon Village, which hopefully we'll see when we get there. I've never been to Chiseldon before, so I'm just going by what I've seen from the book and from what I've seen on the internet, so hopefully it will be okay. I will stop there for a very, very late, well, it's almost like an afternoon tea, I think it will be, so just had a quick bite at 2 o'clock there. It'll be about 4ish, I think, by the time I get to Chiseldon, and then walk back to Coate before I catch my bus. But it's a delightful place. Now, I prefer doing these walks during midweek. One of them is that on a Sunday the railway services are a bit unreliable, as you probably know if you've caught a train on a Sunday recently. Often cancellations, and also places like this, because it's leisure. This is now a cycle path between Swindon and Marlborough. Places like Coate Water at weekends will be much busier, so it's much more of a pleasure to do these during the midweek when it's a lot quieter. Now, when I was walking along the track bed, slightly over there, which is tarmacked obviously by Sustrans, I think it opened in the early 2000s, possibly a millennial project, if I can find out an exact date, I saw bits of a red brick wall. Well, I realised, of course, it's not a red brick wall at all. The Sustrans path goes on a slightly different route, and the railway originally would have gone underneath here, so on a little bit of a cutting. Remember, we were on embankment, goes into a cutting and out through the other side because of this occupation bridge, which is just an access path for a farmer's field just that way. So that's the line of our Midland and South Western Junction Railway here, which is parallel to the Sustrans route to where we're going to, and indeed on to Marlborough. Now oddly the railway seems to be infilled at this point. In fact, they've infilled underneath that bridge, and the cycle path and footpath goes on different routes, so they've raised it here. It's going on a raised level, and then it heads down this way. Not sure why they've done that, and the route didn't go underneath the bridge itself, which we've seen on other railway walks, of course. Maybe it was because the bridge was unsafe and they didn't have the funds to restore it. It's probably the most likeliest of explanations. Now on a more substantial embankment again, we're quite steeply up above the surrounding land on both sides. Very odd that bit there, because the track bed, inverted commas, is doing that, and obviously they balance that with planting some new trees when the track was put in by Sustrans probably 25 or 30 years ago now. But it's good that the route is still open, and this bit here, we're on an embankment and indeed a curve. You can see the curve behind me in the embankment now. We're going to be on more of a curve, and as we're curving round into Chiseldon, indeed, you get a greater sense that this was once a proper railway line. I'd like to thank a gentleman called Grant Bain for suggesting this video. When I did my last one around towards Marlborough, he said there's some things to look out for in the Chiseldon area. Certainly was with that bridge parapet there, but as I say, shame that it was infilled. Anyway, we're going to continue on there, so thank you for that, Grant. Continue on here to Chiseldon and see what we can find when we get into the village there. Now again here, the Marlborough cycle path diverges away from the route of the Midland South Western Junction Railway. The latter, the railway, curved away down there, but our cycle path curves up here to get into the village. Not sure why that is, maybe again to do with access rights. It looks like that is probably private down there, and I think it's blocked at the other end as well, so we'll need to continue on this way to get to the location of Chiseldon station. I'll tell you more about the village as well when we arrive. Well, I think you'll agree this is a magnificent find here in Chiseldon. I didn't even know about the existence of this bridge. I took a footpath down which picks up the line of the railway again. This bridge, I think, is an area of the village called Washpool. I'm not sure if we can get onto the top of the railway track bed up there. There's some gates up there. See if we can go in under the bridge and up around the other side. So this part of the village of Chiseldon is known as Washpool, and at one time a gentleman's cottage, he was called Daniel Weston, that was demolished to build a railway here in 1881, round about the site there. This beauty spot's hidden within a deep fold of the landscape. It's close to the centre of the village as well. The name Chiseldon, incidentally, comes from the Saxon Ceo-sel, that's C-E-O-S-E-L-Deen, which means a stony and gravelly valley. It was also here there were lots of streams that at one time provided the water source for the village itself. Now, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a way up onto the track bed up there. It's very overgrown here, there's lots of nettles, and of course I'm on my own, so if I slipped I'd be in real trouble. And as you can see, there's lots of dense vegetation. And on the other side, where it is a bit easier, there's a fence as well. So it looks like it is private land up there, but not used for anything. Be good if it could be taken back into public use. So what I am going to do is carry on walking along here at Washpool, which is a delightful spot. I've got it all to myself. Just the sound of the birds in the little valley here with the old railway line to my right hand side. We'll head in the direction of the church and see if we can find the location of where Chiseldon station was here on the Midland and South Western Junction Railway. I'll tell you a little bit more about the station here at Chiseldon, and as I say, see if we can find the site and any remains of it and what it looks like today. So I've just come up that path there from Washpool, and it brings you up onto the railway line, the track bed, Midland South Western Junction Railway, which is just along there. Although it is private, you can see private just on that tree there. So I'm not going to walk down there, but if you carried on down there, that would indeed take you along the top of the bridge that we saw earlier. Let's have a quick look in the opposite direction. That's where things get really interesting. So there's our access path there, so that takes you up into the woods and into a, looks like a former quarry area. That's our track bed again, heading into the site of what was once Chiseldon's railway station. Let's go and have a closer look at that. So I'm currently standing on what would have been the track bed with two platforms either side at the site of Chiseldon station. Now, see those houses on the right hand side. Now have a look at this photograph here. There, the lower one down there. See these cottages there? The ones there. They're the same ones there, looking in the other direction. So let's just spin round through 180 degrees. The line of our railway actually went right through here, right where those houses are now. But if you compare it to the photograph, which was taken, I believe, in the 1890s, you'll notice something. Yes, the road actually went over on a bridge over the railway tracks there. I thought it might have been a level crossing, but no, that's the same view, what it looks like today. What about the station itself though? Well, in the upper photograph in the book you can see the signal box out there and the bridge that carried the road, minor road, and the railway going underneath. And again, that's the present day view. Now, the track bed into the Chiseldon station site actually came through that gate there. You can access it from the other side, from where we were at Washpool. Up that path gets you to it, but you can't walk either side of the track bed because that is private. It's a property called Mount Pleasant. So let's go back the other way, see if we can find any remains of that bridge. Well, before we get to the side of the bridge, there's a small car park here off the green where the station was, and there is a wall there. That wall is part of the original station buildings, the back wall to it. May even have been the corner of where the signal box once stood. The thing I was looking for in this area is that which is the station master's house here in Chiseldon. Now, is there any thatched properties in this area? Well, I'm just looking along the line of where the railway would have once been. Let's just bring you up there and you'll see a red post box, and there's some thatched cottages there. I don't think that was the line of the station master's site itself, but we'll go over there and have a look. Now, I think this wall here adjacent to Chiseldon's post office was part of the railway, because the railway was in a little bit of a cutting here in Chiseldon, and I think that was built by the railway in the 1880s. And here, if I'm not mistaken, at the rear of the post office is some original railway fencing. So there we are with our photograph with the bridge, road, the wind's taking the page, road going overneath the railway, and that's the abutment of our bridge there, which now forms the corner of Chiseldon's post office. And now we're looking down on the site of the railway station, and that's in the back in the direction of the town of Swindon. You can see literally how lines being active here would have literally divided the village in half. And the station itself, that's that post box I was showing you here, adjacent to Stroud's Hill. It commemorates Chiseldon's railway station. It was actually done by Chiseldon Parish Council and the Memorial Hall Fund a few years ago. It's got some additional photographs here, which I don't appear in my book. That's a great photo there of the station itself, as has appeared on opening day in 1881. Staff of Chiseldon Station there in 1915. Last day of steam there, view from the bridge in the 1950s. And there's that station master's house there on the edge of the cutting, which is just behind me. Although I don't think the station master's house, it has survived, but the thatched cottages behind it have. And there's a plan, which again doesn't appear in my book, of it there. So you had a waiting shelter there, the main building, and SB signal box. I think that's the direction of Swindon there. Also here you had the Elm Tree Inn in this area, closed in 2009. This here is Station Road, next to the station. Here's these thatched cottages, and I think Station Master cottage was on the opposite side. Now this is the landmark hotel, and the railway would have been a cutting just the other side of it. And sadly I think that's the location of our Station Master's house, the one with the thatched cottage. And you can actually see the cutting of the railway here, running alongside where the present day hotel is today. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my 21st Lost Railway walk here on West Country Wanderings, looking back again at the route of the Midland and South Western Junction Railway. I'll link to a couple of the other ones. I think I've done 3 others, the Watermoor one, the Swindon one, and the one looking around Marlborough previously. And I hope to do one looking at the northern end of this line, north of Cirencester up to Cheltenham in a future video, and perhaps one heading down towards Ludgershall, which is just on the edge of the Hampshire town of Andover, but also in Wiltshire, which is close to but not quite into where we've been today here in Swindon. Until next time on West Country Wanderings, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and hope to see you on another railway series, or indeed perhaps one of my other videos that I do across the wider West Country, anywhere from the northern tip of Worcestershire right down to Land's End. I've done Mousehole recently. Also got a video coming up soon looking at Newlyn and Penzance, and we'll be back in Wiltshire again before not too long. Until then, take care. All the best now. Bye bye.